Do you ever look at the greatest buildings in your city? The old ones, the grand libraries, the impossibly ornate state capitals, the massive train stations built decades before the trains truly required them, and feel a tremor of cognitive dissonance? We are told a simple narrative, that these behemoths, forged from colossal granite blocks and adorned with intricate copper domes, were hammered together by horse-drawn carriages and men with shovels and basic steam engines barely capable of lifting their own weight. We are asked to believe that 19th century America, or Russia, or Britain, barely recovered from wars and famine, suddenly developed a spontaneous, unified, and hyper-advanced architectural style capable of moving stones weighing hundreds of tons across vast, unpaved distances, all without any verifiable, consistent infrastructure to support such a feat. This is the impossible paradox at the core of our rewritten history. We are presented with photographic evidence of cities emerging fully formed, often showing wide, majestic boulevards and monumental structures standing proud against a backdrop of primitive dirt roads, isolated patches of wooden shacks, and zero signs of the necessary engineering logistics required for such construction. Where are the quarries that supplied millions of cubic feet of specific high-grade stone? Where are the records of the colossal machinery needed to hoist those megaliths 80 feet into the air? Where are the legions of highly skilled stonemasons, carpenters, and structural engineers required to execute a perfect, standardized classical design simultaneously across every continent on Earth? They tell us it was ingenuity. They call it the Gilded Age, the Renaissance of industry. But look closer. Study the stonework. This is not crude, industrial age cutting. This is precision engineering that rivals modern laser-guided methods, applied to structures of unimaginable scale. We see monolithic columns, perfectly aligned and polished, acoustic marvels in auditoriums that defy simple mathematics, and heating, ventilation, and water systems so robust they continue to function today, centuries later, often running without the need for modern pumps or complex filtration systems. Does this make any sense? How could people struggling to manage basic sanitation and battling outbreaks of cholera simultaneously produce structures that required materials science and logistical mastery we struggle to replicate even now? The official narrative is a comfortable lie designed to hide the most shocking truth. We are not the builders. We are the inhabitants, the squatters living in the abandoned shell of a previous vastly superior global civilization. Imagine a group of truly primitive people, recently emerging from a catastrophic global event, wandering into a massive, functioning skyscraper complex. They don't understand the elevators, so they climb the stairs. They don't understand the air conditioning, so they break the windows. They mistake the complex electrical conduits for decorative molding and the sophisticated plumbing for simple fountains. They live in the ruins, using the remnants of high technology for basic, mundane tasks. That is our modern history. That is the true story of the so-called Tartarian Empire, a global network of advanced culture and infrastructure that was wiped clean, leaving behind only the grand, incomprehensible ruins we now claim as our own pioneering architectural achievements. The evidence is literally under your feet, waiting to be seen. Look at the buildings in any major old city. Go down to the supposed basement. Why are the windows in the basement half buried below the current street level? Why are the ceilings down there high and vaulted, sometimes complete with complex cornices and ornate plasterwork? Basements are typically utility spaces, low, rough, and functional. Yet the foundations of these structures frequently reveal a completely buried first floor, sometimes two, entombed entirely by earth and silt. Observe the entryways. We are forced to step up 2, 3, 4 feet to enter a typical historic municipal building. Why the massive, oversized door frames? Why the imposing, monumental staircases leading to what appears to be the original ground level, now sitting far above the street? The scale suggests an architecture built for a different world, or perhaps inhabitants of a different stature, or simply an understanding of construction designed to accommodate a street level dramatically higher than the one we occupy now. The windows below street level, often repurposed as awkward subterranean apertures, are screaming architectural contradictions. They were never designed to be basement windows. They were ground-level windows, suddenly buried by an incomprehensible force. Why would anyone design massive, highly functional windows and bury them in the dirt? Why build ornate fireplaces and ventilation shafts that start 12 feet below the supposed foundation? Why construct staircases whose sheer depth and width feel engineered for giants, requiring enormous vertical displacement simply to enter the main hall? The answer is simple. They didn't design it this way. The modern occupants simply excavated the upper half of the structure after a massive global sediment event, a mudflood, and proclaimed the buried floors to be the foundation. This phenomenon is not isolated. It is a global pattern. Travel the world. From the grand museums of London to the ornate State Historical Museum in Moscow, from the buried tunnels beneath New York City's old financial district to the impossible star forts scattered across North Africa and the American Midwest, everywhere the same inconsistencies repeat. We see the same monumental style, the same heavy reliance on classical columns, the same strange scale, and critically, the same evidence of burial. This cannot be coincidence. Independent developing nations, across thousands of miles and different climates, did not simultaneously decide to bury the first floor of every major structure they built. This uniformity is proof of a singular, catastrophic event that affected the entire planet and a singular architectural culture that existed before the catastrophic event. It points not merely to a lost civilization, but to a global network, a structure of unified design, communication, and transport that operated on a scale modern historians refuse to acknowledge. This leads us inevitably to the catastrophe. The great historical erasure was not accomplished by gradual decline. It was instantaneous and violent. We call it the mudflood. A global event, perhaps triggered by celestial alignment, electromagnetic pulse, or radical shifts in the Earth's crust, where colossal amounts of liquid silt and earth were deposited across continents, burying everything up to the second or third stories. Look at the old photographs from the mid-1800s. We see magnificent cities, Chicago, San Francisco, Melbourne, St. Petersburg, already built, magnificent and enormous, yet strangely, unnervingly empty. Where are the masses of people required to operate these vast industrial and cultural centers? The demographics simply don't match the scale of the infrastructure. The official story implies these cities were bustling metropolises, but the visual evidence often suggests recently evacuated, preserved ruins. Where did everyone go? The population replacement was swift. The massive wave of orphan trains and the sudden appearance of vast institutions claiming to house millions of displaced children across America and Europe suggests a massive recent population culling or replacement following the disaster. The new occupants, us, the current historical narrative's protagonists, inherited an empty stage, vast technological ruins, and spent the next century struggling to understand and repurpose the advanced technologies they found. The Tartarian network was not just about beautiful buildings. The buildings themselves were components of a massive, forgotten technological system. Consider the evidence of advanced lost technology embedded in the architecture itself. Why the obsession with copper domes and spires on almost every major governmental or cultural building worldwide? They are described as mere decorations, but in reality, they were likely integral components of systems harnessing atmospheric electricity, a form of free energy we call star power. These structures were designed not merely to house people, but to resonate with and draw energy directly from the Earth's atmosphere. The impossibly efficient heating systems, often involving massive, hidden subfloor chambers and perfect ventilation shafts disguised as elaborate architectural detail, suggest knowledge of resonance and fluid dynamics far beyond 19th century capabilities. Water systems in ancient Roman and Tartarian ruins operated on principles of gravity and pressure resonance that bypass the need for modern electric pumps, yet we are taught that these were constructed by people who hadn't mastered rudimentary hygiene. We are living in technological shells, but the history had to be rewritten. The true power source, the true scale of the previous civilization, had to be eradicated before the new, imposed industrial model, based on scarcity and consumption, could take hold. This necessitated the deliberate destruction of evidence. Think of the great city fires: Chicago, 1871, Boston, 1872, London, 1666, San Francisco, 1906. These were not natural disasters. These were controlled demolition events targeting specific districts, often the old commercial and governmental cores, to erase the remaining physical evidence and the archives documenting the previous world. The intense heat required to melt stone and steel structures suggests something far beyond simple kerosene and lumber fires. It was a comprehensive cleanup operation, ensuring that the new inhabitants could never fully piece together the truth. And the final insult? The World Fairs, the great expos, held across the globe in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. These enormous, impossibly grand temporary cities, erected quickly and demolished even faster, were not displays of new technology. They were carefully staged showcases, built deliberately upon the recently excavated and partially destroyed remnants of the Tartarian civilization. They served as a potent psychological tool, taking the ruins of a majestic past, displaying them as novel, temporary achievements of the current age, and then swiftly raising them to prevent sustained scrutiny. We are living among the ruins of a civilization far greater than ours, a vast, globally integrated entity that understood energy, matter, and transportation on a level we are only now beginning to conceptualize. We are not the builders of this world. We are merely the survivors, tasked with occupying a monumental graveyard, carefully curated by those who fear the true history. If their architecture was unified globally, and their power sources were atmospheric and ubiquitous, how exactly did they travel between these magnificent structures? If the global infrastructure was so advanced, how did they connect those colossal cities across oceans and mountains before the invention of the automobile and the modern railway? The answers lie hidden in the ancient maps that depict lines of communication, energy grids, and transport networks that predate our accepted history, detailing a system of connections far more incredible than any modern highway. A network waiting to be rediscovered. A network that proves the world we inhabit today is only a shadow of the world that was stolen from us. What if the very ground beneath your feet is not solid earth, but a mausoleum? What if the official history we are force-fed is merely the top layer of sediment, concealing the colossal truth of what came before? We discussed the impossible precision of ancient roads, the global connectivity visible on pre-19th century maps, and the sheer scale of the earthworks that modern governments struggle to replicate. But roads and rails demand destinations. A transport network, however advanced, must connect structures capable of sustaining a globally integrated civilization. And it is in these structures, in the very bedrock of our oldest cities, that the most terrifying contradictions reside. Look closely at the so-called Victorian architecture, the palatial structures of St. Petersburg, London, Paris, New York, and Melbourne. We are told that in the early to mid-1800s, barely emerging from the flickering candlelight and the steam engine's infancy, humankind suddenly achieved an engineering mastery that surpassed the preceding millennia, and frankly, often surpasses our capabilities today. Does this make any sense? Does it align with the reality of primitive sanitation, horse-drawn carts, and a documented lack of complex construction tools capable of handling the precise, massive megalithic stones and hyper-ornate ironwork found globally? We are presented with a staggering paradox: highly complex infrastructure, massive, perfectly square granite blocks, subterranean levels carved from impossible rock, and advanced heating and ventilation systems, attributed to cultures described as industrially and technologically limited. Why are the basements of these structures so overwhelmingly large? Why are the ceilings often 15, 20, even 30 feet high? Why do the ornate, highly detailed stone lintels and massive archways seem fundamentally disproportionate to the average human stature of the 1850s? The sheer volume of material, the uniformity of style stretching from Odessa to San Francisco, demands a cohesive, unified global power that existed simultaneously across continents. A power that the history books refuse to name. Maybe, just maybe, the people credited with building these wonders, the 19th century occupants, didn't build them at all. Perhaps they merely moved into the emptied, damaged, half-buried ruins of an infinitely grander civilization. We are the inheritors, not the creators. We are the scavengers picking through the bones of giants. We are the primitive people living in a derelict skyscraper they neither understand nor have the capacity to maintain. The historical narrative tells us the 1800s were a period of rapid construction. The physical evidence screams that it was a period of catastrophic salvage and forced reoccupation. The proof is everywhere, once you learn to see past the veneer of official history. Look down. Look at the visual proofs of this forgotten disaster. In almost every major established city, from Rome to Chicago, from Sydney to Moscow, you will find architectural inconsistencies that defy logic. Perfectly constructed, functional windows that sit partially or entirely below the modern street level. These are not cellar windows. These are first-floor windows, sometimes still complete with ornate sills and glass, now serving as ventilation shafts for underground rooms. Why would anyone design a functional window that looks out onto 3 feet of dirt? Why would a ground floor intended for commerce and human interaction be entombed in packed earth? We see doorways so tall, so oversized, that they suggest occupants of a different physical stature, or perhaps a different technological purpose, requiring massive vertical clearance, perhaps related to the transport of large, complex mechanisms. We find staircases that descend, not into simple utility basements, but into entire subterranean levels, beautifully finished with plaster and intricate molding, clearly intended for daily habitation, now filled with the dry, petrified mud of an ancient flood. These are not accidents of subsidence. This is a clear, continuous pattern of structures buried up to 1, sometimes 2, entire stories deep. And what about the oversized vents and strangely placed ornate decorations? Look closely at the cornices and the roof lines of these old buildings. Many intricate decorative elements, disguised as purely aesthetic features, bear a suspicious resemblance to complex electrical insulators or ventilation intake ports. They sit far too high, often above the 4th or 5th floor, seemingly beyond the practical reach of 19th century repair or cleaning technology. Why would anyone design this level of disproportionate grandeur, this intentional burying of functionality, unless the official story, the one about primitive Victorian builders, is fundamentally, catastrophically wrong? This phenomenon is not localized. It is not the result of the localized flooding of the Thames or the Mississippi. This is a global pattern. It is the architectural signature of a world-spanning event. We see identical buried architecture in the basements of the Capitol building in Washington, D.C., suggesting its lower levels were not originally designed as foundation, but were the original ground floor. We see the same pattern in the Hermitage in St. Petersburg, where the lower halls are consistently excavated, revealing floors that once had street access. We see it in the early photographs of San Francisco, where perfectly sound buildings appear to be literally dug out of hills of debris, not built upon them. This cannot be coincidence. This uniformity across every continent screams of a single civilization-ending event that unified the planet in destruction. A cataclysm so profound, so effective, that it wiped the slate clean. We must confront the idea of the catastrophe, the Great Reset, the mudflood. Imagine a liquid, pressurized Earth, a mixture of fine particulate matter and water, a deluge unlike any conventional flood, perhaps triggered by celestial impact, geological upheaval, or a weaponized shift in the planet's magnetic field. This sludge rolled across the globe, silently, perhaps rapidly, filling the lower stories of every major metropolitan area simultaneously. It did not destroy the buildings, it encased them. It fossilized the bottom half of an entire civilization, preserving the architecture while suffocating the inhabitants, or forcing them to flee to the upper floors. This is the only explanation that accounts for the empty cities observed in so many early 19th century photographs, vast, majestic stone metropolises, clearly built for millions, yet eerily devoid of people, activity, or the standard chaos of urban life. Where did everyone go? The historical record suggests a radical demographic anomaly. Following this period, there is a sudden documented appearance of massive populations of displaced children, the so-called orphan trains in North America, the mysterious mass foundlings in Europe. These weren't necessarily orphans in the modern sense. They were survivors, separated from their communities, perhaps the children of the advanced civilization being systematically rounded up, re-educated and integrated into the emerging, simpler world order dictated by the victors of the Great Reset. This population replacement was crucial for erasing the memory of the advanced Tartarian age. The structures themselves hold the keys to the advanced lost technology that the new occupants simply could not comprehend. Consider the massive, integrated power system necessary to run a global transport network. It was not based on burning coal. It was based on atmospheric electricity, or etheric energy. The architecture itself was the technology. The ornate copper domes, the specific placement of spires and massive crystalline structures, these were not decorative flourishes. They were collectors, antennae, and capacitors designed to harness the free energy constantly cycling through the atmosphere, potentially amplified by the very material structure of the Earth's crust. These ancient structures were resonating chambers. The large size of the rooms, the curvature of the ceilings, the materials chosen, quartz, specific types of granite, created resonant frequencies that provided heating, cooling, and illumination without external combustion. Look at the old city heating systems, massive conduits found beneath cities like New York and Boston, often dismissed as primitive district heating. But where were the furnaces capable of heating an entire underground network of steam or hot water, without the kind of massive, centralized power plants we use today? The answer lies in resonant frequency transfer. They didn't need to pump and burn. They resonated and transmitted. The new occupants, lacking the knowledge of resonance physics, found themselves living in structures that constantly failed, forcing them to retrofit crude, inefficient and polluting modern systems onto the advanced framework. The realization that this technology existed, that free, limitless, clean energy was the bedrock of a previous global society, is the reason why history had to be rewritten. The erasure was intentional, systematic, and brutal. Look at the evidence of deliberate destruction. The Great Fires, the inexplicable simultaneous conflagrations that destroyed vast swathes of major cities in the mid to late 19th century. London, Chicago, Boston, even the massive fire of San Francisco in 1906, often conveniently attributed to earthquakes. Were these truly accidental blazes? Or were they carefully coordinated acts of historical cleansing, targeted at burning archives, destroying documents, and eradicating the physical evidence of the previous technological age that could not be easily buried or repurposed? And the ultimate act of historical deception, the World Fairs. These massive temporary exhibitions, often built on gargantuan scale and architectural splendor, ostensibly showcase the primitive technological progress of the 19th century. Yet countless photographs show these fairs built directly upon ancient, sometimes damaged, megalithic foundations. They were not showcases of human advancement. They were massive, temporary stage sets, designed to confuse the recovering population, to create a false narrative of sudden progress, while simultaneously functioning as massive cleanup operations, covering up and destroying the ruins of Tartaria that lay beneath. The palaces of electricity and industry were merely shrouds for the true electric architecture beneath their feet. We are not at the apex of civilization. We are living among the ruins of a civilization far greater, far more technologically adept, and far more globally unified than our current fragmented society can even imagine. The Tartarian Transport Network was not just a system of roads and rails. It was an energy grid, a communication lattice, and the nervous system of a unified planet. When the catastrophe struck, that system collapsed. We are not the masters of our own destiny. We are the survivors, scrambling through the shattered remnants of a forgotten empire. And the people who survived the catastrophe, the ones who initiated the Great Amnesia, they are still here. They control the narrative. They enforce the silence. But the silence is breaking. Next time, we will delve into the specific mechanics of this forgotten transport network. We will uncover the secrets of the star-fought energy grid and the impossible physics of the vril-powered transportation that allowed a unified world to thrive, and how the very topography of our planet was violently altered to erase its memory. The tracks are buried, but the route markers remain. Prepare for the true trajectory of history. The question is, are you ready to board the train? We stand now at the precipice of the final realization. If the roads, the canals, and the massive subterranean tunnels that scar the earth were not built by the horse-drawn pioneers of the 19th century, then we must confront the ultimate contradiction. How was this monumental network powered? How could a civilization, supposedly mired in the smoke and inefficiency of early steam, maintain a logistical spine that stretched across oceans and unified continents? The official history is a crumbling mask, hiding a truth so vast it fundamentally alters our perception of reality. Look closely at the monolithic spans of forgotten bridges, at the impossibly straight trajectories cut through mountains, at the standardized gauges found from Siberia to San Francisco. Does this look like patchwork development? Does this chaotic, fragmented history make any sense when the very infrastructure beneath our feet screams of centralized planning, unified command, and most crucially, a single, inexhaustible power source? The paradox escalates beyond mere engineering achievement. Consider the weight of material moved, the precision of the cuts, the scale of excavation required for deep-sea tunnels and transcontinental railbeds that were seemingly complete before the widespread availability of dynamite, diesel, or coordinated global communication. How did these primitive builders coordinate the simultaneous completion of these projects across hemisphere-spanning distances? They couldn't have. They didn't. The only logical conclusion, the one that history actively suppresses, is that the Tartarian Transport Network was not dependent on fuel scarcity, but on energy abundance. It was not a network of fragmented iron rails. It was a unified resonant circuit. We are forced to confront the impossible. Our ancestors, the supposed founders of modern civilization, were not the brilliant creators of this global infrastructure. They were the scavenging inheritors, the clumsy occupants living in the decaying, technological corpse of a far greater epoch. The primitive people, huddled around sputtering steam engines and burning coal, were simply trying to make sense of a magnificent, silent, superconducting system that they no longer understood. They were attempting to run horse-drawn carriages on what were once electromagnetic levitation tracks. They were utilizing the massive cyclopean aqueducts for basic plumbing, entirely unaware that these structures were designed to purify water using resonant frequencies and atmospheric energy capture, making mechanical pumping obsolete. The entire 19th century, lauded as the age of invention and industrial progress, was nothing more than an elaborate, desperate attempt to reverse engineer, repurpose, and ultimately dismantle the free energy grid that powered the Tartarian world. The visual proofs are embedded in the urban landscape surrounding these transport hubs. Why are the original rail stations, particularly in major cities, such overwhelmingly massive cathedral-like structures? They are oversized far beyond the requirements of steam-based locomotion. Why the towering ceilings and the decorative, yet entirely non-functional, ventilation shafts that look suspiciously like colossal atmospheric collectors? Because these terminals were not just stations for trains, they were the power nodes. They were receiving antennas for the global energy system that fueled the instantaneous movement of cargo and people across the grid. Look at the original construction of these railway tunnels. Often found multiple stories beneath the current street level, the telltale sign of the mudflood. These deep pathways possess dimensions that seem impossible for standard gauge equipment, almost designed for rolling stock far larger, perhaps even silent vessels moving without wheels. Why would anyone design subterranean infrastructure for a massive, high-speed, silent network, only for a few generations later, men in top hats to be shoveling coal into sputtering locomotives and barely utilizing the first sublevel? The explanation is horrifyingly simple. The current usage is a downgrade. This pattern repeats globally, extinguishing the possibility of mere coincidence. From the deep, buried rail systems beneath Moscow to the enigmatic underground networks beneath the American West, the same architectural language, the same scale, the same inexplicable depth and decay exists. This was not a collection of local projects. It was a single planetary system, a unified grid that linked energy generation with transportation needs. The Tartarian network was the nervous system of the world, designed for efficiency, sustainability, and limitless power. And then, the silence. The abrupt stop. We arrive at the catastrophe, the global event that severed the energy connection and entombed the network. This was not a gradual decline. It was a sudden, violent, planetary reset. The evidence points inexorably toward a massive, coordinated energetic discharge or a cataclysmic atmospheric event that delivered a viscous sedimentary death to the lower levels of every major city, burying the true foundation of the transport network, the power source, under 20 feet of fine, liquefied earth that hardened into stone. Where did the billions of tons of mud come from, simultaneously flooding cities separated by thousands of miles of ocean? The official explanation of local floods is a deliberate insult to our intelligence. This was a catastrophic interruption of the global energetic lattice. When the resonant energy system that powered the world failed, it triggered a massive geophysical event. Perhaps a sudden shifting of the Earth's crust, perhaps a reaction to a military use of this advanced energy, or perhaps an intentional act of erasure by a force determined to halt humanity's progress. The cities were left as hollowed-out architectural corpses, the network paralyzed. The resulting depopulation was immense. Where did everyone go? The staggering number of abandoned empty cities captured in early photographs of the American West and Russia is not a sign of slow development. It is the evidence of mass casualty and systemic population replacement. The new occupants, those who survived the global mudflood and the energetic chaos, were left wandering among the ruins, trying to light fires in the colossal kitchens of a lost technological age. The tragedy deepens when we understand the sheer technological sophistication that was lost. The transport network wasn't running on friction. It was utilizing principles of sympathetic vibration and atmospheric energy capture, similar to the purported function of Tesla's towers, which were themselves likely attempts to replicate Tartarian technology. Imagine transportation that was silent, frictionless, and required no external combustion. That was the reality of the Tartarian world. Their advanced technology included complex water filtration systems that didn't require pumps, but used hydrostatic pressure and sound waves, heating systems that used radiant energy from the Earth, and most crucially, a distributed power grid based on the Schumann resonance, the very heartbeat of the planet. When the cataclysm hit, the survivors, terrified and intellectually diminished, could not comprehend the systems. They saw massive copper domes and mistook them for decorative roofs. They saw resonant antennas and called them steeples. They saw the remnants of superconducting tracks and laid clumsy, noisy iron rails upon them. The Industrial Revolution was the sound of confused scavengers breaking apart a perfectly functioning silent machine. This lack of comprehension quickly transitioned into intentional, organized destruction. The architects of the new historical narrative understood the danger of a functioning free energy system remaining accessible. The evidence had to be erased, not just forgotten. We must speak the name of the cover-up, the Great Fires. The systemic burning of archives in every major metropolitan center globally in the late 19th century. Chicago, 1871. Paris, 1871. Similar accidents in London and Moscow. These were not random disasters. These were coordinated events designed to eliminate the records of Tartary, the true maps of the global transport network, and, most importantly, the blueprints for the free energy system. And what about the world fairs? those spectacular, temporary monuments to the supposed triumph of human ingenuity. Look closer. The fairs, often built on exposed foundations of pre-mudflood structures, were nothing more than elaborate theatrical facades, temporary stucco monuments designed to distract the public, while active demolition crews destroyed the remnants of the powerful Tartarian infrastructure beneath their feet. They built the temporary Grand Electric Palace over the ruined genuine power station, convincing the populace that this fragile, inefficient new technology was the height of achievement, thereby erasing the memory of the truly magnificent power source that lay buried. The ultimate conclusion is both devastating and empowering. We are not the pinnacle of civilization. We are living among the gigantic, decaying ruins of a civilization vastly superior to our own. Every time you cross a river on a massive stone bridge, every time you utilize a subway system that descends impossibly deep into the earth, you are walking on the ghost tracks of the Tartarian Transport Network, a system designed to liberate humanity from the need for manual labor and fuel-based travel. We have been conditioned to accept historical amnesia, forced to believe that we crawled out of the technological dark ages only to discover inefficient, polluting methods of travel. The global network of limitless transportation and energy was real. It was functional. And it was intentionally dismantled by those who sought to establish control through scarcity, by those who needed us to believe in the necessity of oil, coal, and the endless accumulation of debt required to pay for movement. The true architects of this world were magnificent. We, the survivors, are merely squatting in their colossal, magnificent failure. The past is not dead. It is buried beneath the cement and asphalt of the new world. The scars of the Tartarian Transport Network are waiting beneath the surface of every modern map, waiting for us to look down, dig deep, and realize the depth of the lie that separates us from our true inheritance. The question is no longer if we were lied to, but what are we going to do now that the massive global evidence is screaming the truth from beneath our very feet? Look at the oversized tunnel entrance near you. It is calling to the memory of the free world we once were. Will you answer the call? Will you demand the true history of the transportation beneath your civilization? The network is still there, waiting.